All right, we're back. So I loaded up Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and open those images that we were just rendering. Let me set this to details. There we go. So it's these first four right here. So I'm going to select the render, depth, shadow, and mask. We're going to open these up. And so here we have everything. And now what's interesting is you'll notice that the render here, when I took it out, this is the same render that you saw in ZBrush. If I go back to ZBrush, it's this exact same image. But because ZBrush is setting up a document that has a gray background like this by default, that might be good if you're just saving the document from here, if you're just exporting this image through the document menu. But since I'm taking out the individual passes, I'm actually getting things that I have to actually comp together in Photoshop. So let me jump back to Photoshop. So here is the same thing. I have my depth map, my shadow, and my mask, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go and take this mask. I'm going to do Control-A, Control-C to copy, and I'm going to go back to my render, my original render, and I'm going to go into the channel, and I'm going to create a new channel, a new alpha basically. Now I'm going to hit Control-V to paste in that mask. Let's go back to our Layers tab here. Now I am assuming that some of you, if not all of you, have Photoshop experience, at least to navigate through things like channels and layers and stuff like that. If you don't, you can totally just bypass this whole part of the process that I'm doing, and you can simply just export your document through ZBrush, okay? But in this case, I went ahead and copied this alpha into our channels. And now I'm going to do the same for this depth map here. Control-A, Control-C, go back to my render, back to my channels, create a new channel. And this is basically my depth map. I can go ahead and close those two now, since I've already copied them in. And now let's go to my shadow. I'm going to hit Control-A, copy. And now back here, I'm going to basically just copy this right on top of the background. Let's turn off the shadow for a second. And in fact, I'm going to select this background. And we're going to basically do a copy and paste of just Dobby. So this is where the mask becomes important. So that alpha 1 being our mask, I'm going to select it. And I'm going to drag it down to this little squiggly circle here, dotted circle. That's going to basically activate that mask as a selection. Let's go back into our layers. And with that background selected, I'm going to simply do Control-C, Control-V. And we basically just copied him onto his own layer. You can see we got a nice, clean, soft edge. That's because of the aliasing settings that we set in ZBrush. So now I want a background to go with this. So I'm going to basically generate a new layer. And let's go into our color palette, and let's just choose a background similar to what was in ZBrush. We'll do something like this. And just paint bucket that in. Maybe we can go darker, just to make it a little more dramatic. There we go, that's fine. Now, you'll notice I have no shadows on the floor. This is where our shadow layer is going to be important. So I'm basically going to select this shadow. I'm going to go from the normal blend mode. We're going to just multiply this. And we're going to get that set onto the floor. I don't want to double up on the shadow on his body. So what I'm going to do is go back to my alpha. Let's load that again as a selection. Come back over here to my shadow layer, and let's just delete that portion of that shadow layer. Okay, so now let's start naming this stuff appropriately. So this is our ground shadow. This is our render. And this is our background. And to be really diligent, we can go into our channels and let's call this our mask. And let's call this depth. All right, sweet. So now let's go back over here. Now what can we do to spruce this up a little bit? Just make it feel a little more nicer. You know, obviously I didn't do anything to materials in ZBrush, everything pretty standard. But there are different things we can do here to make this nicer. So I'm gonna go back into ZBrush. And what I'm gonna basically do is create rim lights. Now, in order to do that, I wanna turn off all the color of this, okay? So I'm gonna actually go over here, and whatever subtool I have selected, if I hover over that little paintbrush icon and hold down Shift and click down, it'll turn off all the color for everything. It'll just basically make everything with no color, or at least it should have here. It doesn't look like it's doing it here, and that's probably because I have some textures turned on for these subtools. If that is the case, which I don't anticipate that being the case for you guys, but if it is, come down to your texture map, and here you can see I have texture on. I'm just going to turn that off, and you'll see the color will go away. I think that was the only one. Probably this one I have it turned on as well. I'm going to turn off that. Okay, sweet. So now I've effectively turned off all the color for all of my subtools. And I just want to give this now just a straight up white color. So I'm going to hold down the space bar. Let's go ahead and drag this color to white. And now what I'm going to do is in the light menu, for this light, if you just click on this black dot, or in fact click anywhere on this ball, it's going to send that light to the back, okay? So now it's basic to the back, and you can see wherever I drag it out, I'm effectively dragging out like a rim, and you can see that rim, how strong it is there. So let's say I want something like that. That looks like it could be pretty cool. Let's keep that intact. I'm going to go and render this. And let's just sit tight a second, and you'll see exactly what kind of render I'm going to get here. Should just give us a nice rim along the left-hand side. There we go. That's pretty cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and export this render. So let's go to Render, select the shaded, and we're going to name this appropriately, of course. So we're going to call this Davi Rim 1. The numerical value is very important because we might want to do an additional rim on top of this. So I'm going to come down and adjust this light once more. Let's actually do one on the opposite side. Hit that render once more. Now, if you're trying to achieve a rim light on your render in ZBrush without actually comping it in Photoshop, you may have a lot of trouble there. So this is part of the reason I opt for doing render passes, because it gives me more flexibility. So now I have this set up. Let me go ahead and export this render now. We're going to name this Rim 2. Now let's go back into Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and open up those two images, Rim 1, Rim 2. Control A on Rim 1. Let's go back to our render. And let's select the topmost layer and hit Control V so that this goes on top. So that was Rim 1. Let's close it now, and let's go to Rim 2. Control A, Control C, and we'll place that over here. Perfect. So now let's name these layers. This is going to be Rim 1. This is going to be Rim 2. Let's turn off Rim 2, and let's just focus on Rim 1 for a second. Now, if I go and switch the blend mode from normal to screen, we now have a rim on top of our model here. And if I toggle this on and off, you can see the effect that it's given me. It's kind of cool. If I'm feeling like that rim is a little too strong, I can go to the opacity, tone it down a little bit. So this is the kind of control you gain by rendering layers and then comping it together in Photoshop. Now let's say also that, maybe this is feeling like I need to adjust the values of it altogether. So what I may do here is go to Image, Adjustments, and Levels. And let's actually switch the blend mode of this back to normal for a second. So I'm going to switch it back to normal, and I want you guys to see this. So I can go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, and just by kind of dragging this out, you can see I can adjust the fall off of that rim. If I want it to be a really tight, harder rim, we can do that. So maybe something like that. Maybe that's all I want, just something really, really tighter on that edge. I can say OK. Switch this back to screen. And now you see what I get there. And now maybe what I want to do is just drop that opacity down just slightly, right? Now let's go to rim number 2, turn this on, and here we have the same scenario. I'll go ahead and switch this to screen. And you can see what I'm getting there. So I'm getting like a stronger one on this side. Maybe, but the thing is, I want you guys to dictate what you want there. If I turn these on and off here, try to determine what's adding and what's not. And I would say that maybe what I should have done here was go for a harder rim on this side and a softer one on the opposing side. I think that would feel a little more accurate. Yeah, I think so. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to actually turn this rim 1 off for the time being. Let's select rim 2, go to Image, Adjust, Levels. Let's really try to emphasize that side a little bit more. That feels pretty good. I like that. And now I'm going to open up that rim 1 again. Let's do Control A, Control C. Come back over here and do a Control V to paste it in. Let's remove the original one that we had. That way I'm starting again from scratch on this one. Let's go ahead and screen this one in. And I think with this one, I'm just going to drop down that value to something a lot softer. Something like that. And it feels pretty cool. Now here's the other cool thing that I can do here. Assuming, if I just want a solid background, of course I can stay with that background. But if I want something that's a little more intricate, or like some kind of gradient or something like that, I can just select it. Go to this gradient over here, pick a couple values. Let's do one that's a little lighter like that. And let's go to our gradient tool. Yeah, I like to select that second one for the circular. In the wrong way. Let me switch these values. Now I'll just start dragging out something to see what it gives us. It starts to feel a little cool. You can kind of start to create a lot of different looks here. So here I'm just trying to give the impression of a little more light coming off from the side, right? And then maybe the last thing you want to do as a piece for yourself is, let's go to the top, create a new layer, and let's say you're proud of it and you want to do something to kind of signify that. I do have a logo for myself, but for you guys, you can either sign it. In this case, I can go in and if I don't have a logo, which I do, but I'm not going to dig it up right now, I could just go in here and just sign it if you wish. Or to be really clean and easy with this, what I recommend you guys do, select a white color. Take that text tool, come right down here, and I would say Charles Ellison, Modeling 1, course, for you guys, you know, you're going to use your name. And let's switch that to a more appealing color here. So maybe I'm thinking white will be good. There you go. You know, do something like that or whatever. I don't have anything set in my head as far as like a presentation of, you know, like the template. What I do want from you guys is an image that's nicely rendered. And you can see ZBrush is pretty straightforward with that. Render out that image, get it set with a nice nice background, something really simple, keep it clean. And then of course your name, course, you know, name. If you have a name for your model, include that as well. And try to be really fun about that. Just keep this portion of it really minimal. You don't want this to take attention from your work, okay? So then, of course, at this point, in fact, with that said, I think I'm going to drop down the color of that just to keep it really, 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 really low key. That's how I like to do it, low key. So let's do something like that. And maybe even adjust the opacity a little bit. There we go. Something really, really standard like that. Maybe put a little line. You know, just make it nice and pretty. So now I have this. And then the last thing I wanted to save it out. Make sure you're saving your actual Photoshop file for your comp. So I should go ahead and hit Control S. Save that out. And now I'm going to basically go to File, Save As. We're going to save this out as a JPEG. You're going to name it whatever your character is, or in your case, I would prefer that you put your name. So Charles Ellison Dobby Final, you know, whatever, something to signify what this represents. I'm going to say save. Make sure the quality is set all the way to the max. And now I will go and open up that file. Here it is right here. And there it is. So you'll end up with a nice little simple but polished image of your character, okay? So hopefully this is enough for you guys to work on to kind of get your characters established with a nice little presentation. Really straightforward process in ZBrush. You know, the only thing that it requires though is a little bit of basic Photoshop knowledge. As you can see, I'm not doing anything too crazy. You know, just layering some different layers. You know, adjusting opacities, changing blend modes, and ultimately just trying to end up with a nice little final image. Okay. All right. So if any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. I will see you guys Tuesday night, and give this a lot of love. Okay. This is representing you guys as artists. So I want you to be proud of it. All right. Take it easy.